So before we begin, this meeting, we're going to have, first off, thanks for joining us. And so we'll have two people speaking, not the usual three, but this is wonderful that we have a little more time with beautiful images of both Don McDonald and Andrea Deese, both of, and I know that if you've been tuning into some of the meetings, you know what you're in for a treat tonight. So this is very, very good. And actually next month will be the same. We'll have two. Be Timor, who's here right now. And I just woke him up, it looks like. And then Amy Newfield and Jason. Well, they'll be talking about Australia, and Timor about British Columbia. So, but then the last part, the reason I'll mention it now so I don't, just in case I forget, last part of the meeting next month, which will be our last meeting in this year, that we're just dedicated to just live, instead of having a survey that we pass out, I want to find out what people would like from the future, from next year. What would be something that you would like to see the meetings look like, or topics covered and stuff like that. We've had surveys before. We aim at trying to get most of those, but I know we get some, miss some, but if that's where we can just bounce around some ideas. So anyway, let's begin with Dawn. Now, Dawn, fresh on a trip swimming in Argentina with whales, is switching gears and going to show us some fabulous images of sharks and how to photograph them. Not that we want to photograph the white sharks that are in Cape Ann right now, but we want sharks in clear water.
Sure we do.
Sure.
Sure we do.
So we want a little advance notice when we see them come. Because an extra 20 feet would help.
Yeah.
So anyway, let me turn it over to you, Don. And
Okay.
perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I am not a professional. I'm just going to tell you my experience photographing sharks. And I have been probably on more shark dives than any other kind of dive. And I've got about almost 2,000 dives. So I've been to Cocos Island 6 times. I have almost 200 dives there. The Galapagos, have been all over on shark dives. So I'm just going to explain to you how I learned how to photograph sharks and the things that that helped me get better at it over the years. I actually have some very old images in here that I shot with a Sea Life DC 500, I think. So, you'll see my cameras evolve over the years, and currently I shoot with a Nikon D850. So, this image that you see on the screen was taken with the Nikon in Bimini. But this is not just a show and tell. So first, I'm going to talk about the technical stuff. And that will be probably the shortest part of what I have to say to you, because the settings for sharks, when I jump in the water, if it's blue water, a blue water type of place like Bimini, the Bahamas, Cocos, you meter for the blue, but I usually jump in with 1/250th of a second, f8, ISO 1 or 200, depending on how clear the water is, how deep the dive is. If I change anything, I change the ISO. Because on the D850 in particular, that handles ISO, it handles noise very well, so I don't have to really worry too much about noise. But if you go in the water with those settings, you will get a good enough picture that you can, if it's not exactly right, you'll be able to fix it in post-processing, I think. Of course, then you have to throw strobes into the equation. And the most important and perhaps difficult thing on the technical side of things is lighting the subject. If you don't have your strobe power dialed in, your strobe position dialed in, you can, because their bellies are usually very white, you have a tendency to blow them out, especially if you've got the sun behind the shark, like in this picture that you see. This was taken in the Bahamas. My settings, I think on this one were f7.1, 1/250th of a second, because that's how fast my strobes can sync. And the ISO was, I think, 320 on this. But it was probably 50 feet of water. So also on the strobe positioning, I would say 90% of the time, I position my strobes on, I have 16 inches of arms on my camera, and I position the strobes straight out the sides, like Titanic, with the heads angled back a little bit, the arms behind the dome so that the fisheye doesn't get the strobes in the picture, and so that you don't get hot spots on the edges of the picture. So the strobes have to be back a ways, and you want to envision that the cones of light that come out of the strobes, the edges of the cones are just going to hit your subject. And then the next thing that you have to consider is how far away the subject is, because if they're too far away, the light from the strobes is not going to hit them. And also, if you're shooting, I shoot almost exclusively with a fisheye, a 15mm fisheye on a full frame sensor. So on a 15mm fisheye, I have to be within 3 to 5 feet of the subject, or else there's no point in me taking a picture. That's how I feel about it anyway. So that's kind of the technical stuff. I'm brushing over it kind of quickly because that's not, in my view, those things are not the most important thing about taking pictures of sharks. All the other stuff I'm going to talk about, in my view, is more important. Lastly, as it says here, you want to remove uncertainty. Shooting sharks is fast-paced action. You don't have time to think. So if you don't have time to think, and the only time that you have is in figuring out what position the shark is in and where he's coming from and how close he's going to get, you don't want to have to look down at your camera and figure out how to change your f-stop or how to change your shutter speed or your ISO. So when I first got all of my cameras, I sat in a chair in the living room and I learned where all the settings were and how to adjust them without looking at the camera. When I got my housing, I put it in the housing and I did it with the camera in the housing, how to adjust everything without looking at the camera. Because when you shoot sharks or whales or mantas or anything large and fast, you don't have time to think about that. You don't have time to look at your camera. You just have to shoot. The other thing, if you know it's an exclusively going to be a shark dive, and I'll talk about the different kinds of shark dives that there are, but if you know that you're only going to be shooting exclusively sharks, you can also put your focus on continuous so that you're continually focusing. And you can also put your shutter on, I call it rapid fire, like a machine gun. So when you pull the shutter, you're getting 5 or 7 or 8 or 10 pictures, however many your camera can handle. Because then maybe one of them will be sharp and maybe you will get the shark in just the perfect position. So that's just about all that I have to say about settings. If you guys have questions, you can certainly ask me at the end, or after we go through some of this other stuff. So this is what I think is the most important thing that you have to learn in order to photograph sharks. You have to know what kind of sharks you might encounter and what kinds of behavior they have. You have to know how they move and how they swim. And how, if a shark is just cruising along slowly on the reef, what are they doing? What does that mean? If they're darting around and looking like they're hunting, then you might want to shoot them in a different way. So only because I've been in the water with so many sharks for the last 25 years, I pretty much know how they're going to move, and I can put myself in a position where they will come close to me. It's not easy to get a shark to come within 3 to 5 feet of you, but if you move properly and you understand the shark's behavior and how the shark is likely to swim and where they're likely to go, then you will be able to get them to come close, and you'll be able to take great pictures of them. Which leads to human behavior. Now, this is not a good picture, but I put it in here for a couple of different reasons. That is my sometimes same ocean dive buddy, Veronica, and I put it here so you could see how she put her strobes on this dive. Of course, when I showed her this picture, she said, "Why did I have my strobes like that?" It is an option to put your strobes like that. If you've got like a sandy floor, you might want to get your strobes off of the white sand a little bit. So I don't know why she did that, but notice how low she is to the bottom. She's not up in the water column where the shark's going to see her and maybe be afraid and say, "What is that? What is that? That's something that looks scary that I need to avoid." You don't ever want to chase a shark. For one thing, it's pointless. For another thing, you'll just scare it away and ruin it for everybody. If you try to chase a shark, or if you start swimming towards the shark, even if you don't intend to chase it, if you come up in the water column and start swimming to intersect the shark or to get anywhere in front of it, he's going to get scared. It would be a far better idea to just stay where you are and not move. If you don't move and you're in front of a shark in the direction that it's swimming, it's very likely it's going to swim into you. And then it's just all about timing. You have to time when you to pull the trigger. If you do it too soon, your strobes might not sink fast enough to get another shot when it's in the perfect position. So that's another reason you have to learn about the shark behavior, how they swim and how they move, so that you know when is the right time to pull the trigger. Which direction is their face going to be? Because they swim kind of like this. So you don't want to get them when their face is not in the right position. If you see one approaching and you are not in front of it, and you can swim parallel to it. If you swim parallel to it, they're not going to get freaked out. I always say you have to act like a fish. You act like a fish, they'll think you are a fish and they won't be afraid of you. If you're able to be in the sand, you can get down and kneel in the sand. Hide behind rocks. Get as low as possible. In some places where I've been, like you can see in this picture, actually, like behind the shark, there's kind of a trench. I was actually in a trench opposite my friend here taking these pictures, and the sharks were just coming from every direction because they didn't see me in the trench. So hiding, staying low, making yourself look like you're part of the reef is the best way to get them to come close to you. So there are a few different kinds of shark dives that I've been on. One is what I'm going to call the bait box. In this picture, this was the Bahamas aggressor. You can see behind the shark, there's like a little triangle hanging down from the boat. They put bait in that triangle, and the sharks can smell it, and they come just because they smell. And then they tell you to stay away from the triangle, but if you start getting bored, you swim up and you shake the triangle, and then all the all the sharks come flooding to the triangle and swirling around. So this dive in particular, this is a lemon shark. It draws a lot of lemon sharks, a lot of reef sharks. And what happens is they do a circle around the triangle until they get bored because they can't actually get any of the food. So this to me is not an ideal situation because you usually have divers all around in the way, bubbles all around in the way. But if you want to be guaranteed that you're going to see some sharks, you can, this is one kind of shark dive that you can go on. And you'll get good pictures of sharks. They'll come to you because they're not afraid because this is what they do down in the Bahamas. Um, these same sharks actually follow the boat wherever it goes. So every dive, you're going to see the same sharks in the water. So that's one kind of dive. Then there's cage dives. This is, again, not a very good picture taken with an old Olympus camera. This was a juvenile great white in South Africa, and the cage situation was not what you might think. It was kind of a long, skinny cage where 6 people were lined up in the most awful chum smelling wetsuits that I've ever been in. And there's a bar in there, and no snorkels or anything, no air. So you had to hold your breath, duck down, try to hold yourself in the water, stick the camera up to the bars and try to take a picture. So this was not ideal. We didn't really like it, but we got to see great whites. So there's cage dives is another way that you can dive with sharks. Then there's shark feeds. This is in Bimini. You can see he's got a piece of fish and he's feeding. That's a juvenile tiger shark named Harlequin. They name all of the tiger sharks in Bimini after Batman characters, and they name all of the great hammerheads after Greek gods and goddesses. So this is Harlequin. And the way these dives work is they put you all lined up in a semicircle in the sand. You've got a stick in case you have to push the sharks away. And there's usually some current there. So you're trying to hold yourself in place with a lot of weight on and just take pictures as the sharks come in to get fed. But the problem with this kind of a dive is sand getting kicked up everywhere. You've got a line of 20 or so people. Everybody's kind of jockeying to get into position. You're shooting with a fisheye, so it's so wide that you're going to get the people next to you in the frame. And you're always going to have the shark feeder in the frame unless you get creative and figure out how to take these kind of shots. And again, understanding the behavior of the sharks is going to be key here in getting good pictures. And I'll explain more about that in a second. And then, the wild and natural kind of shark dive where you just go to a place where there are sharks and you see sharks doing their thing in the normal way is, of course, my favorite kind of shark dive. That's how you're going to see. This is Socorro. These are silver-tip sharks in Socorro cruising by on the reef. And you can see I was pretty low. I was hiding in the rocks. in shooting the sharks from behind rocks. In Cocos Island, you can hide behind rocks, rocks and structures. The same thing with in the Galapagos. And then there's wild and natural sharks, but lazy sharks. All the sharks that just sit in the sand on the bottom. So this is a wobbegong in Raja Ampat, sitting under in like a little cave. And the way to shoot these is you get right down in the sand in front of them and you creep up as slowly and calmly as possible. You control your breathing. You have to have perfect buoyancy. And you just creep and creep and creep until you get close enough. And if they start to get nervous and you see them move a little bit, you stop and you don't move for a minute. And then when they settle down, you creep again. And eventually they get comfortable with you. Usually they get comfortable with you and they settle down, and then you can take some pictures. I was not patient enough with this one because a second after I took this shot, he yawned and I was turning away and I missed the shot. So that was unfortunate, but patient, you have to be really patient with the ones that are sitting in the sand. Same thing here. This is a banded guitar shark in Cabo San Lucas. I just crept up to him in the sand and took this picture. This is the one with the DC 500. I took this in Cocos Island. White tip reef sharks just sitting on the bottom. And you can see they're looking at me like, what is she doing? Because I was just creeping closer to them until I could get a decent shot. So putting all of this together, then you have to try to think about composition. So this was a Halloween dive off of the Bahamas Aggressor. My friend's in a skeleton suit, and there were reef sharks just swimming around. This was not baited or fed or anything, but there were a number of sharks swimming around the boat, probably thinking they might get fed. And I saw the sunbeams coming down and the sun on the top of the shark, and I said, oh, what a great picture with the white ladders. So, sometimes you have time to think about composition. Not always. This is my worst nightmare. Those of you who've ever been diving with me know that I don't like being in the water with people. Anybody, really. So this was awful, but I knew that it was going to be like this. And I knew the sharks. I knew there were going to be tigers and there were going to be great hammerheads. I know how hammerheads are. When hammerheads are coming in and being fed, or when they're coming into a cleaning station, for example, 9 times out of 10, they're going to keep coming in the same direction. So once I got in the water and I saw that the hammerheads were coming left to right into the feed box, I positioned myself so that they were swimming into me on the ends. So I had 2 dives. This was the second one because I was on the right-hand side of this big line of people shooting that way. But on the first dive, I was on this opposite end because I figured then I at least would only have people on one side of me. You also want to think about where the sun is, especially in a place like the Bahamas, because it's going to be glowing off the sand. Probably you're going to overexpose certain things if you're facing into the sun, if the sun's reflecting off the sharks in the sand. So you have to really, you have to close down on your settings a little bit so that you don't overexpose everything. The other thing is, as you can see, there was current. There were bubbles everywhere, sand everywhere from everybody moving around. So this is not an ideal situation. But from this, I got this. I was on the end of all of those people. The tiger sharks, by the way, they're unpredictable. They'll come from anywhere. So there was no planning when it came to the tiger shark. But so I was on one end and she swam right in front of me with all of these fish and these other sharks. And I was able to get a clean shot with no people, no bubbles, not blown out by the sun. And then this was when I was on the other end, facing into the sun. And like I said, I'm usually the first person in the water. So when I got in the water and I saw which direction the sharks were coming from, I went on the left-hand side of all of the people. And then this shark came from the left-hand side and swam right into me. So I was probably 3 feet from this shark. And then this same thing, we were waiting for the big sharks to come because, all these reef sharks, I guess, aren't good enough. And so I was sitting on the swim platform, holding my camera in the water, trying to shoot over-unders with all the reef sharks just to occupy the time. Um, and I kind of like this one because he looks like he's smiling into the camera. So, Andy also just mentioned I came back from a whale trip and I used this on the whales and got some of the best photos of my whole trip by throwing myself. I didn't have time to get in the water because the whales were right there. And I just threw myself over the back of the boat. Somebody held my feet and I had the camera in the water shooting. So don't forget about that either, because that's a great way to get some great shots with different compositions and you don't even have to get in the water. This is a silver tip in Sakura. You can see a fish hook ripped the side of his mouth off. Again, hiding in the rocks, and this shark came by probably 3 or 4 feet from me. This is the Red Sea in Egypt. Whale sharks are different than regular sharks, of course. They tend to like the divers. They will usually, not always, but usually they will circle around and come back. You think they're leaving, everybody starts chasing them, which you should never do because then they won't come back. But if you just stop and stay where you are, they'll circle around and come back. They have a tendency to be interested in the divers. So the challenging thing about shooting this particular whale shark is the bright sun. It was probably 11 o'clock in the morning. And when he swam into the sun, I had to dial down the f-stop so that I didn't blow things out. So I was not looking again, switching around fast as he was swimming back and forth. And the whole time just flipping the dials without looking so that I didn't blow out the picture. And then when he was away from the sun so that it wasn't too dark, underexposed. And then you can always do the silhouette shot if they swim overhead in the bright sun. And this picture actually got accepted into a photography show in Glasgow, Scotland. It was called Light and Shadows. So this picture is really more about the light than it is about the shark, but I still like it. And then I had to throw in one from here. So this is dogfish from the Patriot. I did not turn the background black. We didn't have good visibility. He was kind of far away, although this picture's not cropped. So the strobes just, I was very lucky that the settings were good. The strobes just hit him, and I was lucky that the focus didn't grab that little cunnerfish instead of the dogfish. Um, but so that's about that's about all I have to say. I don't know if you have any questions about anything that I've said. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Yeah. Don, that was fabulous. Beautiful images and great information, but the images were stunning. So terrific.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I
Yeah, thank you,
appreciate it.
Don. Was awesome.
Anyone have any questions?
How far
Yeah.
away were you on this last shot? How far away do you think the strobes?
On this one, I mean, I was probably 6 feet from him.
Okay.
Dawn,
Yes.
are you shooting around about 5 frames a second when there's lots of action?
So I don't usually shoot with the sharks multiple frames per second, but with the whales that I just shot, I was shooting 7 frames a second.
Thanks. Lovely.
They're when they're coming at you, yeah, it's actually harder than sharks.
Don, do you shoot raw?
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great images.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
What is your main camera?
My camera now is a Nikon D850, and I shoot with a Sigma 15mm lens in a Nauticam housing.
Mhm.
And when I go around here, I shoot with the smaller dome, but I don't really like it. I'm just afraid to ruin the big dome. I have a big 10-inch glass dome for trips. And seeing 2 YSD3 CNC strobes with the dome diffusers on them. That made a huge difference, by the way. Those dome diffusers, when I got those, made a huge difference in my lighting. They really help. So if you can, even if you don't get those exact strobes, I think you can sometimes make some kind of little dome diffuser or get an aftermarket one or something to put on your strobes. I really recommend that. It helps really soften and spread the light nicely.
Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, your first image inspired me. I don't know if you can see it.
Which
No.
one? Which
Uh,
image?
Yeah. Yeah.
1 second. I can't shut down. Um, how do I turn off my background? Oh, okay, I found it. Background. None. Can you see it now?
Oh, yeah. That one?
Very good.
The first one, yes. Love it.
So this one, actually, I have to tell you, I probably should have put it in here. The black and white of this is better than this one. I like the black and white, and it won like first place in an exhibit, actually, a juried exhibit. The black and white is nice. So that's another tip. It's not really about taking the picture exactly, but if you blow out the belly of the shark or the sun ball, or it's just more overexposed than you can fix, turn it black and white. They look really good.
Right.
I can imagine the sun's rays would look spectacular in black and white. So I'll show up
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, this one looks good in black and white. It's not blown out or anything, but it does look really good in black and white.
These are really, really great I love sharks. I love and the key, like you said, is the behavior, really learning their behavior. And I've done some shark dives in Florida where you don't have the sand, you're just in the blue. And that's great, as long as, you don't shoot too early, like the deep shark dives.
Yep.
It's just going to be muddy, even with the strobes. But if you can wait and just as come up and those sharks come up with you, and you can get some of the sun with them, or just a little bit of light. But the blue background, I just love it because you just get shark, and you can really avoid other divers because the sharks are coming in everywhere. And again, you're in the blue, so
Yeah.
you can really avoid people.
But in the blue is sometimes challenging too, because if you can come up with them like you're describing, that's great. If you're in front of them, again, you want to try not to be flapping around and moving all around
Oh yeah,
and swimming around. Just try to stay as still as you can, and you'll have sharks all around you.
oh yeah, staying still is the key. Yeah.
Hmm.
Don,
In Bimini, who did you dive with?
What did I dive with?
No, who? What company did you dive with?
Oh, I stayed at the Bimini Big Game Club.
Oh, so
I
you
think
were actually on the island.
yeah.
Okay.
I know, unusual, but it was cheap.
and
I
Don is,
had an expensive whale trip last year, so when I went to Bimini, I said I just need something quick and cheap. So,
Mhm. I'm asking because I visited the Bimini, but we dove off the boat.
yeah, that's
Something
better.
with the dolphin. I don't remember exact
The
name.
Dolphin Dream.
Yes, Dolphin Dream. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get on that boat, and they're kind of expensive, but
Yes.
they're a good operation though.
Yeah.
so Don, there was a question that just came in that wanted to know if you could explain a bit more about how you were hanging off the back of the boat while someone holding her feet over, so over undershot. So you could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. So, I mean, so in Argentina, I was in a dry suit, like, snorkeling in a dry suit is
Ooh,
and evading whales is the hardest thing I've probably ever done in the water. And I've been to Coco 6 times. So it wasn't easy. So, but you have to, when the whales come close, and it was a mother and a white calf, and the white calves are very rare. So I didn't have time. I was mostly all dressed, but getting my gloves on takes some time. And they were right there by the boat, and I said, I'm gonna miss this shot. What if it leaves when I jump in the water? And I just grabbed the cover off of my camera, and it's an inflatable, like it's a big Zodiac, a pretty big Zodiac. So it's soft, on the sides, and I just flung myself on my stomach over the side of the boat and just stuck my camera in the water as far as I could get it down in the water, and then somebody was holding my feet. I mean, that's it. And then I was shooting 7 frames a second, and the whale, they see the camera, and I think they think it's an eye, because the camera with that big dome is about the size of their mother's eye, and I think they think it's an eye. I That's what everybody seems to think anyway. So they see that, they keep coming to the camera when they see it. They come over, they investigate it. We think they like all the squealing and yelling that goes on because we're all very excited that they're there, and they just keep coming back. And they seem to like the boats. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to screw this up by jumping in the water this time. I'm just going to take pictures like this, and I got some nice shots. So
Dawn, Do you shoot with your strobes in manual or TTL?
Manual.
So do you sort of constantly adjust the settings?
Not constantly, especially in the Bahamas. I mean, it's pretty static. The conditions down there are pretty static. So, but if you're going deeper and then coming shallower,
Yeah.
or you're facing the sun and then facing away from the sun, like depending on, are there shadows, then I might be changing the strobes more often. But not in blue water. I don't have to mess with them too much.
Okay, well, thank you. Don, that
Thanks.
was, yeah, that was terrific. Let's, Reg, you have another question? Was that?
That's all. Thanks. Excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we're switching gears from fast-moving critters to slower-moving critters. You're all, if you watched, participated in some of the meetings, I'm sure you're familiar with our next speaker, Andrea Deese. And so Andrea tonight's going to be talking about shooting mollusks. And while they may not be as fast moving as sharks, they're very, very colorful. And I believe, Andrea, you now the vice president of the
I am.
Yes. So those of you who don't know, malacology is the study of mollusks. And there's a malacological society in Cambridge at Harvard, and they've been around for, I don't know, over 100 years. So
Over, yes.
yeah, so and they have all sorts of presentations and such. So Andrea is the recently made vice president, correct?
Yeah, for a year now.
Well, wonderful.
Yep.
So I'm going to just turn this over to Andrea, and you let us know, let us see what mollusks you have.
Okay. Share. Keynote.
While you're doing that, Liz, as I look at your image here, looks like you have that bird on a tether.
This is spotted eagle ray.
Really? Oh, yeah. I'm seeing it. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking it's a hawk or an eagle or something. Oh, an eagle. Now I see. That's funny.
Right. That was a great presentation, Dawn. Awesome images.
Thank you.
All right, so like Andy said, I'm going to be showing some gastropods and bivalves from New England. I had a whole slew of them from the Philippines, but it would have been way too many. So that could be for another time. So we can just focus here on New England and local, Cape Ann and some from Rhode Island. These are, how many times you swim over a moon snail, and I just, out of the thousands of dives that I have locally, I just sometimes, either before heading out on a dive or on the return, I'll just try to find some interesting color pattern, size. So this one had like pastel at Old Garden Beach. This one here was at Folly Cove, and it was probably an inch long, but the color was just so beautiful, and it kept diving into the sand. You could see how young it is. That membrane around it is like almost transparent, but the color is really what was so beautiful with this one. And this was a different color. It took on like a brown tone. And these all have the animal in it. This is what we typically see. And they do get interesting if you just break it down into the parts of the moon snail. This is a smooth moon snail, or it could be a juvenile shark eye. This was at Fort Wetherill. They seem very common down there, either one, the shark eye or the smooth moon snail. And this is about, I would say, 3/4 of an inch. And they're very pretty. A lot of times you'll see on the bottom in the sand area, a lot of them will be occupied by a hermit crab. But this one looked like it had the snail inside attached to this dulse seaweed. And this one here is at Fort Wetherill, and it does have a hermit crab in it, but what I found interesting was it had a jingle shell on the top, and this is very small. So there's a lot happening here with this little tiny shell. And that, of course, is a large moon snail, just with the beautiful swirl on the side. I love looking at them too, because you can see like how many storms it has weathered and got battered around over the years. And when I first approached this one, it was big anyway, but I couldn't make out what was really going on here. But it was actually a little smaller moon snail attached to the side. I don't know if they're mating or really what was happening. But that's kind of cool when this membrane covers a lot of the shell. Wrong way. And here's Rhode Island style moon snail in the muck. You could just see how you never really see a moon snail out like you do around Cape Ann in the sand. They're usually covered in silt. Even this big one, the sand is like stuck to it in the muck. But it had a beautiful pink color, which I thought was unusual. And these are all shot with either my TG4 or 5, using a spotting light and either 1 or 2 strobes, depending. That's just part of the detail on the moon snail. Another Rhode Island. And here's an egg casing from either a moon snail, or I'm not sure if it was from a shark eye, because I've never seen them with the scalloped edge.
Yeah, not the northern moon, what we have in Cape Ann, yeah, it doesn't have a scalloped.
Yeah, and these were about maybe 6 or 7 inches. And a while back, we were beachcombing with the Shell Club up in, I think it was Lynn. There's a big public beach there, and we were finding these in the sand, like it washed in the low tide mark. So it could be shark eye. I'm not sure, because I know there's a lot of shark eyes in that area. And here's the moon snail collar that we see at Cape Ann, without the scallop part. And it's covered, it's a typical thing we could see here. It's the eggs and the 3-line mud snails. And then this one I found at Old Garden Beach. I believe those are all the eggs covered this dead crab. And then the mud snails were totally covering them. But I just like, some of the colors are purple and two-tone to white, brown. They're interesting for something that we swim by almost on every single dive. And here was one munching on an arm of a lobster. Again, just beautiful colors, even almost like a shade of green. And this one was on a horseshoe crab getting a ride. You can see the animal here. And then this is just a worn, it's a whelk. It's not smooth. I don't know, I get confused tonight with this other shell that I just recently found at Old Garden.
Isn't that the oyster drill? Is that?
Could it be an oyster drill?
That's what it looks like.
So not that, what is it, a smooth whelk?
Smooth whelk. I don't know a
Is
smooth whelk.
The one, I think it's up in Eastport. What's the
You mean
the
a
whelk?
waved whelk?
A wave.
Yeah, that I don't think that's a wave whelk.
And then the wrinkled whelk is the Massachusetts state shell. Yeah,
Yeah.
this might be a very large oyster drill. And then one of my very favorites is the yellow periwinkle. And I have one here. I don't know if you can see it. That's it. So it's about the size of a Cheerio. And here's the yellow periwinkle with a lot going on this regular common periwinkle. It's got a limpet and some northern lacunas. This was at Folly. Oh yeah, and here's another little yellow periwinkle, very small because there's another smooth periwinkle next to it. And just the rubble at Old Garden Beach. This one's the rough periwinkle. It has more of a spire on the top. You don't see too many of these, but they're really nice. Sometimes they're brown or this cream. And then this was the latest. Steve Bigelow and I were at Old Garden Beach and we were returning, of course, on the sand. And I thought this was a dog winkle. And then I thought it was one of those whelks that we see up in Eastport. But the whorls this way makes me think that it's the wrinkled whelk, which is the Massachusetts shell. But I've never seen one this small or yellow. And it was really this bright yellow. And I would say it was about an inch. I even sent it to my friend who's a really good identifier of all shells. And he said it was a New England Neptune as well. So a wrinkled whelk, along with his little sidekick, periwinkle. I just love the way it flares out at the bottom. And here's a very pretty dog winkle, two-tone. There's the animal inside on the bottom. I believe this was at Pierce Island. They come in a variety of solids and stripes. An old weathered one. Surf clam. This one's a horse mussel. Might be at Never Fail Ledge or Paddock Rock. And then these are those miniature mussels. This year I did not see that many of these. Like this wasn't taken at Old Garden, but that big giant rock at Old Garden, like years past, was totally covered in them with all kinds of shrimp. And this year there were none.
Hmm.
This was shot like off of not far from Newcomb Ledge, like in that area behind Baker's Island. Just a bright one. Yeah, and they're miniature. I mean, I don't even know how small these are, but they're like spat, very tiny. And then the sea stars having a lunch break. I think this is a giant horse mussel. And then these, the European oysters, they're around, like Old Garden and Folly has a lot, but they can be very interesting to photograph. This was on an overhang.
Oof.
And this is, you know,
Alright.
like kind of open with the innards and the light, thin part of the shell. And this was just in this the rubble part at Old Garden, like way out, no growth on it, in a beautiful color. That was kind of nice, the ruffle effect. And here's one of my favorites. I remember asking Andy where we could find these. It was about 5 years ago when I learned about this. It's a Pandora gouldiana, and it's about, I would say, an inch. And he said you can find them at Niles Beach. So Jake and I went over to Niles Beach and we beachcombed, and we did find some, but it was much better when we started to find them in the water. They're sort of hard to find. So what caught my eye was this old scallop shell. And then if you look here, that's it. It's got a very pretty opalescence inside of the shell. So I pulled it out, and it's got a weird shape, very flat, but just beautiful. And it had the animal, it was alive. Here's our regular sea scallops. This here was at the UNH Pier. See the excess silt. And this one I found at Old Garden Beach. It was very weird to see something like this in our water that's cold. So I took several pictures, I flipped it, I put it in this mussel shell just to get a sense of size. So it was very tiny. And I sent it to my friend, and he thinks that it must have come up in the Gulf Stream. It's like a Florida type species, Clamis ornata, it could be. There was a few ones, like if, because it's alive, it has all that like growth on it. But if you, you know, dipped it in bleach and cleaned it, it would have like all these beautiful zigzag lines, which it was either, it either survived or it got eaten, because I didn't have the heart to take it, to get it identified. And I think this one's an Icelandic scallop.
Yeah, I think, because, yeah, usually that the hinge, one side is smaller with an
And
Icelandic.
this was, Andy, this was, I think, with you when we went to Eastport, coming in at Dawson. All
Oh.
those rocks. And it was just, I just saw this and it looked like a dinner plate with a shell. That's a slipper shell. So this is very, all this is very small. And this is a base scallop, poor visibility, Fort Weatherall, hence all the backscatter. But what I liked about this is you can actually see the meat on the inside. It was really opening, which is rare, because usually they sense you when they shut. But the color is just beautiful. These remind me of blueberries. I don't know.
And what'd you shoot those macro, the tight macro with?
Just with the TG5, or that was probably, well, it would have been either the TG4 or 5, but in macro and really close. And here it is, like, this is why they're so hard to find. You know, if that was shut, you would swim right over this, but it caught my eye because it opened up a little bit. I mean, that's not the same one. That was a different one, but just to show you, they're tough to find. And then this is a different one. Just, it wouldn't open. Just pretty anyway, the shapes. And that wouldn't open either. Is that a Stimson collis?
I think so. Yeah.
I found that at Old Garden Beach, and I never saw the animal at Old Garden, but it was an empty shell. It just had like that worn, and the grooves was just a pretty shape. And this, I just recently, well, before the storm, I had gone with Fung on a night dive, and for years I've never found these channeled whelks. And not only did we find them, but there wasn't any barnacles and slipper shells on them. Some of them were just perfectly clean, other than this snail fur. It didn't have an animal, but it had a hermit crab. Yeah, just one little barnacle, very clean. And that one's with the animal. That's the operculum. This is how they typically look. You would find it with the marine growth, barnacles. And then the northern lacuna. Their egg, Rockport, egg, Fort Weatherall. You could just see the dust. Animal was on the move. This is all on sugar kelp. Little family in some bryozoan. The eye.
Nice lighting on that. Ah,
The old epitonium. This is way before the Shell Club. I didn't even know what this was.
this was up in Eastport?
It was right at the steamship pier.
Mhm.
So here's the animal, and it's a rather large shell, and then the opening, of course, which is odd for this shell, but it has a round opening opposed to most being oval, and then it's the top of the shell is that way. So this isn't the shell; it's just basically the bottom part. And then I've been finding them at Fort Wetherill, but these are like, I don't want to say microscopic, but you could probably fit 10 on your fingertip. And it's just, with that low visibility and you're just staring at the sand. I just happened to find a couple, but it's very thin and tiny. And no animal but hermit crabs have occupying them. And then this is that same night at Fort Wetherill. I was only shooting this. I never realized this little guy was next to it. It's like the Halloween of crabs. And then I'm just throwing in a few from the Philippines. A paper bubble. This is just so elegant, and it's probably 5 inches long, the animal, and then the shell is maybe 2 inches. But it moves very fast. I actually took video of it. And we found him on a few different dives, and I was shocked.
A treat.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I could have ended the dive after seeing that. I said, oh, I'm good. A Venus comb, and it had the animal in it. A type of murex. Coxcomb oyster.
Ton of marine life on that.
Oh,
Okay.
it's endless, endless. Is another one. It's a grouping of like 4. A bonnet. Ton. An enemy carrying crab. I'm not sure what kind of shell that is. It's loaded. And I've never seen more tiger cowries in my life. I've never seen one anyway. And there were just like groupings of them, and here's, some little paper. And this was some big sponge here. And you could see the membrane is just like right there, because when it covers it, you wouldn't even recognize it. You would think it almost looks like a nudibranch. And then that's the animal where it retracted the membrane. It was just beautiful. A map cowrie, total favorite.
Oof.
These will actually glow in the dark if you have a light, a violet light. And 2 little gobies occupying the shell. Usually you see them in the bottles, but this was just kind of cute. And that's it.
Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well,
Very
you
nice.
said wet our whistle for the Philippines mollusks. So
Yeah, I got a whole slew of pictures.
okay, well, I'll be in touch.
Yeah, pencil that in for a
right.
prospect.
Well, that was excellent. Excellent.
Beautiful images, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew.
It's always fun going through the photos to see what you have.
Very good. Well, does anyone have any questions? All right. Well, again, Andrea, that was great. And Don, yours also wonderful. This was a great women's photographers month. This was terrific. So, both of you, I will be calling on to sometime in the future, in next year. It'll be because this next month is our last for the year, so I'll be in touch to try and get something for whatever month. But anyway, this was all great, and I thank you both for two great presentations, and thank you all for joining us tonight. And again, keep in mind that the last half hour or so of the next month's meeting will be talking about ways that we could, things we could add to the Photo Society meeting. So if you've got any ideas, that'll be the time to share them. So.
Also, a reminder, next month is on the 24th. We are
Oh.
moving it up a week because the last Thursday of the month is on Halloween. So just a friendly reminder, it's going to be 1 week earlier than usual next month.
So what day is it going to be next month?
It'll be the 24th.
24th instead. Okay.
And then so the next month,
Instead of 31. Okay.
yeah, it'll be Timor will be again presenting on the marine life of British Columbia, and Amy and Jason on Australia. So a completely international night. So, okay. If anyone has anything they'd like to add, or
No, thank you. It was a beautiful, beautiful pictures. Really. The sharks and the mollusks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
well, thank you all, and we'll
Yep.
see you in 3 weeks. So that way you'll be ready for Halloween.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Night.
Thank you.